Hi, everybody. You're tuned in to Where Waters Meet, a podcast featuring discussions on fly fishing, art, all things outdoors with a conservation focus. Hey, everybody. This is Alex with Where Waters Meet podcast. You probably noticed that we have a new beard on the show today, and it's an impressive one. And this here is Bentley Hamilton, the one and only.
What's going on?
Hey, I'm super pumped to have you here. It's probably been a little bit long overdue,
Sure.
but
Yeah. I'm very excited to be here. We've talked about this for a long time.
Yeah.
Since kind of conception. So it's been fun to follow the progression of this thing happening.
Yeah. Well, and I love your input. You know, it's been very helpful and but that's been with any venture that we've had. We always kind of sound stuff off each other, and it's always good to have somebody that is like-minded, that's got your best interest in mind.
Yeah, I'd say our friendship has been mostly collaboration.
Mostly, yes. I would agree. Ideas and crazy ideas and
stupid ideas.
Yeah. and business hardships and man, this is driving me crazy. What do you think I should do, or that kind of thing? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's been great. I have a few, friends similar. It's anytime you're running a business, it's always great to have people to bounce things off. And it's, I don't think I'd be where I'm at with my business without it. So I think it's great. It's been great. Yeah.
I agree too. And it's it's hard to find friends like that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
They aren't just sitting out on the street corner ready to be picked up and hey,
not
how
these
about
days.
some advice?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, we should talk about that, like how we met.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of discrepancy in the story.
There is a huge discrepancy in the story.
Yeah.
So you tell your version.
The true version?
If you want to call it that.
we have a mutual friend, basically, is where we both can agree on that.
Mm-hmm.
Our friend Chris.
Well, no, we can't agree on that because he's my brother-in-law.
That's true. I've known Chris forever.
Yeah.
And so
grew up next door, across the street from him.
Yeah, pretty much. Yep. And he was good friends with my older brother. That's how I met him. But anyway, but really fishing is what brought us together first, fly fishing. Because you guys fished together, you and Chris, and then Chris found out I fished, and we all ended up meeting up one day. We can agree on this part of the story, I think.
Yes, we can.
Okay, that's the gist.
Yeah.
I think we met at a place called Sawyer's Bridge in Mechanic Falls. And we fished, and then we started just shooting the breeze, and we figured out that you were doing art and stuff like that, and I was a screen printer, embroiderer.
Yeah.
And we started going off about...
So I do have a question about that, though. So... tell me if this joggles a memory and maybe changes your mind as to if it was at Sawyer's Bridge.
Shoot, I didn't know you were going to have facts and stuff.
So do you remember driving us there in your little Volkswagen wagon?
Driving us there?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you drove us there.
No,
and
you never drove in the maroon what? Really?
No. This wasn't maroon. It was you had just gotten it. And I remember you driving us, and I remember us having the conversation I was talking about where we were talking about art and some of the stuff you were working on, and it was in Gilead.
See, that I have zero real.
Okay. So now I know I'm right.
Okay. Anyway, the important part of the story is we met going fishing.
That is, yes, 100%.
I think,
yes.
As it pertains to this podcast, especially.
The most important part of it, I agree.
Is that we met going fishing.
Yeah.
Trout fishing, fly
fishing. And then I think we kind of hit it off, not just, it wasn't just fishing wise to begin with. I think we kind of hit it off because Bentley and I, we kind of
we're a little bit tormented in the same way as far as like kind of our craft of, you know, me doing art, you doing, you know, screen printing, embroidery, graphic design, all of that.
Yeah.
And I remember you saying, "Oh, you know, I could put some of that stuff on t-shirts." And I was like, at that time, I think I was kind of a little bit skeptical. I was like, what do you know?
Sure.
And but you showed me this butterfly that you did, and it was for like a benefit walk it was something.
Yeah.
But anyways,
Probably. I've printed so much stuff, and I skipped ahead a little bit. We were gonna, you know, we talked about what I do, which we can circle back to that. But I've printed so much stuff in my life at this point that when people bring up, and I've actually kind of been known to crazily remember an amount of stuff that is not normal for how much stuff I've printed. But every once in a while, someone will hit me with like, "Do you remember that project?" And I'm like, as far as I know, you could be totally making it up because I have zero memory of that.
But I have this magical file with your name on it that will remind me.
Yeah, which I do. But but this, I vaguely remember this. I think it was a 4-color process job, which, you know.
It was. It was on white, and it was a beautiful butterfly. It blew my mind because I just didn't really know that any of that was possible at that time.
Yeah.
It was very complicated color-wise. It had a lot of pinks and purples and some yellows and reds and blues and stuff. It was a lot.
Yeah.
And that was when I was like, wow, I got to talk to Bentley more about this. And then we ended up fishing more, and we ended up talking more. Yeah. And that's
I specifically remember, I have a core memory of me sitting in a parking lot in my car.
Yeah.
You called me while I was on my lunch break from the place that I was printing at the time. And that place actually doesn't exist anymore, which is funny. It's a gas station in Lewiston, on Lisbon Street. And I went way over my lunch break time because you and I talked for like an hour and a half, which is why when we talked about you in the podcast, we talked about me being on the podcast, just mainly because if you know Alex and I, we tend to talk a lot. And,
it's bad.
And we can talk for hours and hours and hours about like one minute topic, let alone get into anything else.
Yeah, and what's funny though is I feel like we work fast together. I mean, kind of the story of our lives is we always do things kind of after hours because you're busy, and it just works better if I come down and we collaborate like in person together as far as what we're doing. And it seems like I usually know what I want. And I'm able to relay it to you. You make it happen digitally. Tell me how you're going to do it. We usually get through that part pretty quick.
Yeah.
It's like that.
Yeah.
And then we end up talking forever. And then our wives are like, "Where are you? It's 9 o'clock at night." Yeah. It's like, "Oh, we've been talking for 3 hours about nothing."
Right. And to backtrack a little bit, just to be clear for everybody listening and watching, like I own a screen printing and an embroidery shop. I've been screen printing apparel and like products for a really long time. Longer than I'd care to admit. And so that was like the second phase of us hanging out, was because Alex at the time was kind of just starting into this whole venture of stuff that you see kind of behind us in the painting world, in the art world. And when we met, I almost remember the moment it kind of clicked with you that like, oh, there's like so much more to do with my art. It is what it felt like you kind of coming to that realization. And then we started talking. And when you realized we were kind of talking the same language, we just went, you know, sky's the limit with what was possible. And so at that time, Alex, he got right into the art. You were painting a lot. I feel like you painted some really cool stuff. And I think at that time is when you painted quite a few of the paintings that I would say you're kind of like known for now.
Yeah.
And we started designing clothing based around your painting for your Ale Poland brand. Yeah. And we made quite a bit of product. And so that was like a really fun part of our friendship because, you know, it was something we both were super into, and it was revolved around fly fishing, which we both love. And so we were able to make some really cool stuff. And so that, you know, back to what you were saying about us collaborating, sitting down and working efficiently on some of those designs, I think there's not a lot of times I get a customer that has that ability to sit down and be so creative. So when we sit at the computer together, and do what I'm good at, it just really flows. So that's like always really fun for me to work with a customer that has that skill level.
Yeah.
Because we can combine what we're both good at and create some really neat stuff, which I feel like, you know, we've done.
We have, and I appreciate your flexibility, in just in letting me do that with you, you know, because that's kind of the hard part, is like a lot of people just don't kind of get what vision that I have for something. And I just feel like we've been able to kind of click and we work good in that regard. And I think a lot of it has to do with your love of fly fishing too, in being out there. And like, it's just been a great like culmination of like your skill set and my skill set. And you know, Bentley's even way more than what he's letting on, though, as far as just saying that he's a screen printer and embroiderer and what have you. It's any business that I've been involved in, like Bentley's been paramount in that, as far as production products and logo design. I mean, like we're multiple logos deep now. I mean, like,
we've designed a bunch of stuff together.
yeah. I mean, even just
for your ventures. And,
yeah, I mean, like this is we'll talk about this hat. This is a good thing to talk about. But so this is a logo that Bentley and I, actually, this is probably one of the most labored over things that I think we've ever done together, is this logo.
Yeah, designing the Western Maine Yurts logo was probably our, like, I don't know how to describe it, but you know, all the other stuff was more based on like a piece of artwork for the most part, other than maybe some of the Lloyd's Land stuff. But like this was like, okay, Alex is starting this new business. He came up with a name for it. He had in his mind an image that he kind of wanted to portray from a marketing and a branding standpoint, and he needed a way to bring it to life.
Yeah.
And so that was the fun part. But we definitely took some time on it. We both put in our ideas.
Yeah.
Made a whole bunch of versions of it. Because we just really wanted to get it right. And I think we both had visions for it, and we, you know, respected both each other's opinion about it and wanted to see as much of both of what we wanted out of it to happen.
Yeah.
And the compromise is what you see.
Yeah. And this is one of those things where I leaned heavy on Bentley, because, you know, we do different things, you know, the way that I describe what I do. And the reason why I'll describe it this way is I've had people ask me to do graphic design art before.
Right.
And so
it's not really what you do.
No, not at all. I'm like, look, I like paint with like hog's hair brushes like they did like 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, like it's pretty primitive. It's very hands-on. And then when I get dealing with like the digital creation of art, I just feel like I'm dealing like in the world of like fairies and, you know, ghosts.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, it's just not my realm.
Yeah.
And the hard part for me is I deal with creating something in detail. Logo design, from my standpoint of how I make art, I have so much respect for people that do logo design, because it just feels to me like the most complicated process to make something that represents something and is you remember that.
Sure.
But yet it is the most simplistic form that it could ever possibly be. It drives me crazy. And so, but Bentley does this all the time.
Yeah,
so,
but it's funny because you put yourself in my shoes and I look at exactly the opposite of that.
Yeah.
You know, you talk about complication. To me, it doesn't get any more complicated than that brook trout on the wall.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As somebody who doesn't paint. And so like, I'd never really considered myself a graphic artist because it's not where I started in this business.
Right.
But I've always had an eye for neat things and trends and enjoy kind of trying to create stuff. But I don't draw. I'm terrible at doing anything with my hands directly to paint or canvas. Like I can't do any of that. But I've been doing this long enough, the digital type of stuff, creating stuff for promotional stuff and, you know, the like on the computer long enough where I can take somebody's vision and figure out how to put it on the screen.
Yeah.
Whether we're starting, you know, with something, usually we're starting with something, you know, some type of old thing that they want to change or something they figured out a way to make on their computer kind of halfway, but don't know how to get it to the finish line, or just something completely from scratch, like your Western Maine Yurts logo.
Yeah.
So like that part to me is much simpler because you're taking something for the most part that already has a vision or something that already exists a little bit and molding it into the final project. Um, taking a blank canvas and creating a beautiful image with your hands and paint or however you want to look at it
Yeah.
from nothing. That's like the most overwhelming thing I could ever imagine. Like when it comes to what we're talking about, so it's so, and I think that's why we work so well together.
This is why we work so well together.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it just comes down to knowing what you know, doing what you do, and having different skill sets, and it's worked out great. And I love the times when we do sit down, because it's hard, like for Bentley, I think, because there's times where he probably has to send a ton of proofs to people, and then they say no, and then it goes back and forth. And so like for us, we usually end up just sitting down, which is a luxury that I have as a friend.
Sure.
But like it works great, because you say, well, how about this and this and this? And I'm like, nope, the weight of this line is too much. I think that we need to position this here. I like this color to be a little bit different. And then it happens and we look at it and we're like, yep, that looks good.
Yeah.
And it's kind of instant how we kind of go about it. But I think like our brains, luckily we work and they work well together.
And I think it's time to break it to you that, you thought that was a luxury because we were friends. I tell all the new customers that. No.
Lots of friends.
Yeah. No, it's been great. I think it's been really fun. And so, we've created stuff for Alex's business.
Yeah. And you ought to talk about this too, though, because this is pretty stinking cool. Like, I mean, he does these patches in house. Like, I mean, this is neat.
Not a lot of people in our industry, make patches now in house. It's kind of a lost art. Like I said, we do embroidery as well.
You got one on your
hand? So like I made this from scratch, and we've done a lot of them now, and it's a little bit more expensive because it's more labor intensive and stuff, but for people that are looking for that specific old school look of an embroidered patch or like a hybrid patch like this, which I can talk about more, there's just no substitute. And there's certain stuff in the apparel world, the custom apparel world, that just doesn't get old. And, trends come and go, and patches have been trendy at times, and they have kind of come back a little bit. But there's always a core group of people that like that old school patch look. It's the way it feels, the way it kind of is raised up off the garment, whether it's a hat or a work vest or something like that. And so a while back, I was struggling getting patches made and like outsourcing them. And I just said, I got to figure out how to like make these on my own, just out of a passion project at the time. I didn't really have a huge need for them. I didn't have a lot of requests for them. The few times I did have requests for them, it was usually tire kickers that really probably weren't going to buy anyway. But I just had this weird drive to figure it out. So I spent like a couple of years really trying to perfect, which seems crazy to make something that looks this simple, but it's not as easy as it looks.
Yeah.
And so now we have a pretty good little system for it. And honestly, one of the reasons I know that not a lot of people do patches in-house anymore at volume like we try to be able to offer customers is because it's just the material alone is hard to get these days.
Yeah.
Every time I find a vendor to get blank patch twill material, they last about a year, and then they either go out of business or they decide to stop selling it.
Yeah.
And I got to find a new one. And it's tough because then you've committed to a color for a customer and you can't get that color anymore. And so you got to try to find one and match and make sure it's the same. And so anyway, just what I've been through, I know that there's not a lot of people making patches in the States. Like there's tons of people offering patches, but they almost all outsource them to, an overseas company that will make them and ship them over, and they'll sell them as USA made, but they aren't actually, almost none of them are. So anyway, this is a hybrid patch where we did an actual print, a DTF print on the patch material, and made a template, and then was able to do a traditional stitched border still. And we kind of replicate what used to be called a marrowed border for this traditional patch border look, but we replicated on our actual embroidery machine, so it's way faster and way more efficient.
Well, it's also a higher quality finish to the edge.
It's much more consistent. it's got that old school look, but it doesn't have the old school materials they use to make a marrowed border,
Right.
which almost look like fishing line.
Yeah.
Coincidentally enough,
Yeah.
and it's like a neat look kind of, but they're definitely not as clean. They're not as consistent because the only way to do a true marrowed border is by hand, one patch at a time on what's called a marrowing machine, and that's the reason they're called marrowed borders.
Yeah.
This is like really nerdy stuff that most
No,
people
you know
are.
what? You know what's funny is I'm glad that you're going down this road, and I hope that the listeners pick up on the detail.
Sure.
And what I was gonna say is that this is what I love about working with you is this, and I like being explained things, and I'm sure that you like it because I like you explaining things to me because then I don't ask you to do stupid things for me.
Yeah.
Because
Sure.
you're like, okay, you know what I mean? As far as like screen printing, I understand the basics of like what's going on. But what I was going to say is your attention to detail, which is what I think sets you apart from anybody else that I've dealt with in your industry, is the products that you use. And that's huge for me because like when I go to Bentley, like if you look at this is a really nice hat. I mean, he's wearing that
got
hat.
the same hat. Yeah.
And I got the same hat in a different color on. This is a nice hat. So like if I go to Bentley and I'm like, I got a big head, I like flat brims.
And he's got a really big head.
It is.
Yeah.
It's not quite as big
You'd
as
think he'd-
John's, but
I was
almost.
our friendship jargon almost just came out there. I think I'll say it anyway. You'd almost think you'd be a little smarter with how big your head is.
It's what my wife says all the time.
She's told me that. To
Yeah,
me too,
yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, the products though, like I like it because Bentley can put me onto a good hat. Just this year we did it. We did another run of tees, which we offer on our online store. And we sell here to guests.
Yep.
And I wear them.
Mm-hmm.
And Bentley said to me, he's like, Alex, I know you're putting in another order, and I got this other supplier, and they're US made too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you're gonna love the feel of them. They're a little bit of a longer fit, because I'm a tall guy, so shirts have a tendency over time to turn into a little bit more of a belly shirt.
Yep.
And I probably have a long torso too.
Yep.
And I feel like you're shorter than me, but you also have a long torso.
I got
as
short
well.
little legs, so I have a long torso.
Yeah,
so I'm that's just kind of like what most guys want is a longer shirt. But I'm definitely not big enough to be in like a tall. It would be too long. So I'm always on the search for brands, for example, that are just fitting the way I would want them to fit, because I feel like that's what most other people are going to want to.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good example.
Hoodies too.
Yeah.
That's the big thing too. Like, and I think like screen printers and embroiderers typically kind of sell you Gildan's and just kind of cheaper brands.
The basic stuff.
They're probably making larger margins, on those garments.
Yeah.
But are people really happy with them? Probably not that much. And I just like it because you're like, no, you're gonna like this. This is probably gonna fit you better. The feel's good. This, I've taken this shirt home and washed it 20 times myself, and it doesn't pill. That attention to detail is like huge.
Yeah. Well, we want people coming back, and quality first over everything, and customer service over everything. That's kind of how we've built our business. And it shows.
Yeah.
And we get a lot of repeat customers, and we get a lot of referrals. We've built our business pretty much all on referrals. And that's a great testament to what we're doing is working, and that people are happy with our service. So that's all that really matters. So we're just going to continue to do that. And if, I believe, and we talk about this type of stuff all the time when we talk about, owning businesses and being entrepreneurs is, if you can do those things and put the customer first, age old stuff. This is not like we didn't make it up, but then you really you won't have to worry about the dollar at the end of the day, because that part will come if you put quality and customer service first, and your customers are going to be your biggest salespeople. And we've been very fortunate to have awesome customers like you and tons of other people that we've really become a part of their business and helping them solve these problems to get the product that they want. And they advocate for us more than we do. So we love our customers, and we wouldn't be here without all of them.
I think though that is a very old school way.
Yeah.
And I think it is lost, and we have talked about it. I mean, that's what we've been trying to do here at Western Maine Yurts, you know, and
Definitely.
you know, we're sitting here in the gallery right now, and like, it's hard to build the right way in the modern day world because everything is about pushing product, pushing volume, pushing people, pushing advertising,
Yeah.
and you're really pushed to grow beyond what your actual means are today.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening with that is it suffers. It's no different with if you did that and then the quality of what you're producing suffers, or if the quality of what I'm putting out for a product for people to stay here at these yurts suffers,
Yeah.
or if artwork suffers. Like, so I think it's important to build the right way. And I have so much respect for you with what you've done because, you know, I think we didn't mention, but like, you know, us starting, well, we kind of did touch on it a little bit where you said you talked to me for an hour and a half on your lunch break.
Yeah.
But like, I've been part of your journey from the very beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, to where you just had a manual press and
Well, we've been working together really since before I went out on my own.
yeah.
Way before, really. When we first talked, I was still working at a shop for a guy, and I was running that shop and doing all his printing and design and all that stuff. And like right around the time we started working together, I had just kind of went out with some partners and started a shop. Technically, at that time of my own, you know, like I said, I had some partners, but I built it from the ground up, and that's when I really started to get experience. It was like perfect timing, you know.
Yeah.
Things happen for a reason sometimes, and I was able to experiment a lot at that time because I finally had the full freedom of kind of printing whatever I wanted, however I wanted, and you were really challenging me at that time.
Yeah.
You know, and I probably tried really hard to not let you know it.
Yeah.
But you were really challenging me because some of that stuff I had learned only up to that point, like in theory, a lot of it.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, like you said, you saw this butterfly print that inspired you to talk to me more about it because you saw what maybe
Yeah.
I was capable of. But then what we did was like even beyond that, you know, because we
Yeah.
were really trying to recreate something.
Well,
that was a huge challenge.
Do you
know?
remember? I got to grab this. Actually.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about this.
I'm gonna step out of frame for
Yeah.
a second.
This will be funny. No, I thought he was gonna trip. Yeah.
No, okay, I'm back. But this is kind of funny. This is off. We didn't talking about this, but
No.
like, so do you remember this? You did 4-color process on this on white tees for me. This was like,
I do, and I think we also had a spot color involved too. Maybe an extra spot color to
Yeah.
do it. But yeah, it was a 4-color process on a really light color tee. And I think apparel wise, this was the tee that really made us realize, and a lot of your fans and customers that bought your stuff,
yeah,
this was the one that really, a lot of people, I just feel like we got so many compliments on this t-shirt and so
Yeah.
many people wanted this t-shirt. It was a huge challenge though, and we really worked at this to try to get it to look as close to your painting, because that's the thing is we're trying to recreate Alex's paintings and these designs, and you know, the last thing I want to do is recreate it in a way that doesn't represent the painting well.
Yeah. And I mean, and for people that don't realize, I mean, maybe you ought to touch a little bit on 4-color process and what have you. And for even people that don't understand what screen printing is, you're squeezing dyes through little teeny microscopic holes in screens on top of a garment and trying to make them mix together to create that.
Right. So just to not get too nerdy about it and in depth, you know, there's basically 2 schools of thought, you know, generally for screen printing. And one is spot color printing, which is where you would pull, you know, every individual color, you know, the yellow and the black and the blues would be their own individual screen, and you would print those individually. When you get into a really colorful design, you run out of room on a press. You can't put up this would be 30, 40 screens technically probably to get anywhere close as a spot color.
Oh yeah.
So you start printing the same way like a regular inkjet printer would print, and that would be with CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And you make 4 screens, one for each CMYK, and the dots of the artwork all have to land perfectly and mesh and mix as you print them on the press to recreate like what you would see here or what whatever the artwork is.
Yeah.
That's like the really, really nutshell way of describing it. The problem is like laying down each color is really important, how much you lay down. So mesh sizes, mesh counts come into play for how much ink is passing through the screen, because you can print way too much magenta and, you know, this gets washed out with a red hue, the whole thing. So dialing all that in can be really tough. And at that point, that type of screen printing, you're really relying on the computer to help you decipher
what to do,
where the dots are going to land and how much and all that type of stuff. But then it does take some skill on the press to actually figure out the type of hand, meaning pressure and angle and, you know, deposit of ink to create something.
Oh, I remember the amount of test prints that you did to kind of like dial this in, and I was there, which was really, it was a really cool thing. I remember this shirt. It really was the first tee that we did. And really wanted to recreate this. And I remember just being blown away by the process and the fact that you wanted to get it right. So, I mean, we did a lot of test prints. We were happy with it.
This is one of those ones that in the moment, you know, because I'm connected to this. I was on the boat when this fish was caught.
That's true. Yeah. I know.
And that's like one of I have a test print up in my showroom where customers come into our shop to, you know, talk about orders and stuff like that. And I have lots of samples up and stuff.
You know, I need to give you a picture of the fish that this is based off from.
Yes.
So that you can have it up next to it.
Because when I'm talking about 4-color process, I use this one as an example to customers all the time. One, because it's a good example, and two, because it's like one of my proudest moments of screen printing, because what a cool story and a full circle thing that happened. One, I love fishing. I love fly fishing. And the moment on the boat when this was caught was super exciting to me, because that was early on in Alex and I relationship. And hanging out and fishing. He had been using a drift boat that was new to him, and
Bentley had no beard.
And I had no beard.
He was
so
beard.
This was quite a while ago.
Yeah, he was beardless.
And so it was just all really a really cool experience. And then later for you to paint that from the photo, and then for us to turn it into something cool for apparel was just a really neat experience. So I always make sure I tell people when I point it out on the wall at the shop that I was there when the fish was caught.
You know, I'm glad that you brought that up. I don't know as though we've ever had a talk about that. That's like a full circle experience, like twice though.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I love it. And I make sure to always talk about it any chance I get in the showroom. Just because it's a great thing to connect me to my work. It keeps me motivated, that type of stuff. And projects like that are, you know, what make my job really fun. You know, I can print regular old business logos all day long, you know, and it can get a little mundane. So these types of projects, which I'm fortunate to have a lot of neat customers that do different stuff. And this type of stuff is definitely one of them that I really, you know, enjoy. You know, it's still a lot less like work when I'm working on this type of stuff, like printing a fish that I was there, you know, to be a part of getting it on the boat. In the net.
It definitely blew my mind what you're able to accomplish with it. And I mean, and this is just a print of the original. This was
you must have sold
I did.
You don't have that.
Mr. Jamie Dufour, if you're listening, he is the collector that owns this, and this is still one of my favorites too, because this really pushed my skill set as a painter too. At the time when I did it, and this has a special place in my heart. It's also the most colorful brown trout that I've ever caught on the Androscoggin River, hands down. You were there.
It was a beautiful fish.
It was a beautiful fish. We don't get them that colorful typically, and that's why
I don't know where that one came from, but we were lucky to catch it passing by.
Yeah, it was crazy, but yeah, it was a 24 by 48. It was a 2 foot by 4 foot canvas. It was a big canvas.
Oh, I thought you were describing the fish at first, and I was like, I don't remember it being that big.
4 foot brown trout on the Androscoggin River. But yeah, we'll set this. Yeah, we'll set this out of the way. But yeah, and that's got to be the 4-color process has to be on white though. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to at least have a white background for the most part, because you're using the brightness of the background to make everything work. You can lay down white and then print 4-color process on top of it. It tends to be harder to make it look clean and not muddy. It's doable. I've done it a bunch of times, and it just really depends on what the artwork is.
Yeah.
So yeah, white having a light background at least is pretty crucial. That one that we did for you was actually on a natural color t-shirt, which is like a light tan.
Yeah.
And it worked. It worked pretty good, actually.
Did. Yeah,
we
I
were still
remember
able to but that was one of the challenges to try to get the artwork to stay looking the same.
Yeah.
Was because we weren't dealing with a like totally neutral background.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that affects, because when the thing about CMYK printing is that those inks are specifically for color process printing, and they're all very translucent because they need to mix together.
Right.
Which I'm sure you understand. You have to do a lot of
100%. You know, it's funny too that you say that. I'm hooked up on my knee here. So mixing white. So what's funny with painting in white is like, when you first start out, at least I did, and probably a lot of people do, you just think white's white, right?
Yeah.
And like, so, like if you see the reflection underneath this brook trout back here,
Yep.
that's titanium white. However, if I'm using white to brighten a color, I don't use titanium white, because that white actually kind of muds that color out, and you lose some of the saturation in, vibrancy of it.
Yeah.
Whereas there's like mixing white. Zinc white is another white that I use if I'm mixing with, and I can achieve colors without losing everything else. You know what I mean? And so I imagine it's probably the same thing with if you have a white background that you print. At times it could be difficult with certain images. You probably are losing it, as opposed to if it soaks into a white garment.
Yeah, background's everything. I mean, just like any type of art, really.
Yeah.
The background's going to affect how it's unbelievable how much the background affects how you view artwork or anything like that with your eye. Because if you remove or change the background color, but you don't change the art that you're actually focused in on, you can make three, things side by side where you didn't actually change any colors in the artwork, but you changed the background of those things.
Yeah.
And they look like three totally different images.
Yeah.
We deal with it. One thing I didn't realize would happen, I deal with it in embroidery way more than I ever thought I would. Like, I learned embroidery and started embroidery way later than I did screen printing for a long, long time. And then we started doing embroidery. And thread colors, because of the sheen, for some reason, all really, really get affected by the background color, the garment color. So it's wicked hard sometimes to create proofs properly for people,
Right.
because, it might look different on the computer. And then when you actually go stitch, the color that we picked together, or the customer picked, ends up making the whole thing look totally different. So you have to do some weird compensating with that type of thing. So yeah, it's all neat stuff that, again, I can get into nerdy talking about it, but I do find that customers like to hear about it because, people spending a bunch of money on custom products for their business or whatever, the more they know, the better educated they can to like pick and design the products that they want for their business and know that they're going to get the result that they're actually envisioning. Whereas if they know nothing about the process and then they get something and they're unhappy with it, a lot of times they don't know what to say, and they just say, okay. And then they don't say anything. And that's how, a lot of people end up with, unsatisfactory product for years and years over and over, because they just don't really know how it works. They don't really dare to ask the questions. And a lot of, people in the industry aren't going to just give that information up. I really believe in educating the customer. And if they want to hear about it, talking to them about it. And then I ear badger them for hours on end until they...
I love it. I love hearing all the nitty gritty of it, but background color is funny that you say that, because, this painting's a perfect example that you see back here is, I have
this new one you're starting.
Yeah. This new one in the middle, I have an underpainting on there, and I do that a lot. So
yeah, I never would have, we deal with underlays in the printing business that I do, but typically it's white or light gray or like a light color that's already going to be in the design. But when I walked in here tonight and saw that, I was like, oh yeah. Like, that's interesting. I wonder how that's going to play out. It's pretty
neat because you can do different things with it. There's times where I'll use paint and I'll drag the paint with the brush and leave it a little bit drier so that you actually can see a little bit through that paint, and you can get an effect from having the underpainting kind of shine through. There's other times where I just use it because it sets a tone.
Yeah.
Like let's say that I wanted the painting to, say that you had like like water, and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to start with like a bluish kind of underpainting or something like that. You can kind of sets the tone for what you build on top of it, but it does affect the colors of your paint too.
Yeah,
you know
so
what I mean?
that must really affect like people as learning, because what you're describing to me, the first thing I think of, like, man, that must take a lot of forethought about how you're going to paint your painting.
Yeah.
To decide to commit to all that yellow or gold or whatever underneath, knowing how that's going to affect all the other colors that you lay on
Well,
top.
what's funny is the brook trout are the ones that really kind of like, at first I just would paint like on a white canvas, and the brook trout really changed that for me just because it has the yellows and that shines through with the vermiculation and the spotting and stuff. If you look at it, it actually looks like you have like that olive green, which is translucent, laid on top of that color oftentimes. And so I started doing it, building that off. There's a lot of people that do it just because they're actually intimidated by a white canvas too.
Sure.
So
Okay.
they just get color on there.
Yeah, I can't do that with t-shirts.
No. No, you could.
I could, I guess.
Yeah,
but
you could.
yeah.
I don't know if it would go that well.
No.
But we do have some other stuff here to show off, which
Yeah.
I think is kind of cool, and to go down the fly fishing kind of route. Oh, by the way,
Currently, this is
there's another, that's a Bentley product, you
Yeah.
know, and same thing. Well, I'm like, I need mugs, and Bentley's like, I got the mug that you want. It's nice, it's heavy, it's got a good lip on it. I'm like, perfect.
yeah. Originally, this isn't the mug Alex wanted it. I talked him right into it.
Yeah, he did. He talked me into it. But yeah, so this is a brown trout flank patch, and these
It's kind of another hybrid style of making a patch.
yeah,
Sublimated. So this one was printed on, and then this is a sublimated patch, which again, we could spend tons of time if I start describing sublimation if people don't know what it is. But it's just another way to get artwork, like really colorful artwork, full color artwork onto a patch or anything, and have it be like edge to edge is one of the big things.
Yeah.
So kind of another neat style patch.
And this was the easiest way for us to bridge that gap for my colorful artwork on patches for hats, and they've worked really good. And we've sold so many of these over the years.
Yeah, especially the brook trout flank was a big.
Yeah. And I'm gonna do another flank at some point, and we'll probably kind of upgrade that. But this has been great, and this is, like I said, this is a Bentley special that he does, and for me, and then like this is kind of a popular design that I did. I have it on my drift boat. This is probably my most sought after drizzle painting to have put on stuff with vinyl if it was to be cut.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy because it's not an easy thing to make in vinyl.
No, it's not. And I've had it on my boat for like 5 years. Still holding up.
It's amazing.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But this is screen printed by Bentley.
Yep.
And this is a one color, so this is an easier
pretty simple, high detail, so you're trying to keep it clean. But neat project. I thought the drizzle stuff when you started doing it was really cool, and I think immediately we both thought, oh, this is going to be easy and a little bit easier and really cool to make some like basic, more like budget friendly graphic tee stuff where people can get a piece of your artwork for maybe a little bit lower cost and still like have something really neat, unique, and cool.
Yeah.
And so those were all fun projects. You can't probably see them on the camera, but he's got a bunch of other ones that he's done as drizzles. And all of those came out really neat.
Yeah, the one that we have actually a dungeon fly that's a drizzle piece of art that I did, and it's on the face of one of these hats, and that's pretty popular. And it translates really well to screen printing. It's easy. It gives us more options being a one color.
Yeah.
Basically the sky's the limit as far as what we want to put that on.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
makes it a little easier.
It does.
Direct printing onto hats like we did with the one you were just describing, the t-shirts. You can make it a little smaller, make it a little bigger, easier scale. Don't have to worry about color matching so much. It's more about the image itself and the detail and the trick it plays on your eyes to realize, especially if you know how Alex did those, which is really neat. Maybe sometime you can get into detail about that. But, just overall really neat thing. Sometimes simpler is better, we showed that colorful stuff. Amazing, really fun, lots of work. and then you go completely to the other end of the spectrum and you create this really simple way of creating
Yeah.
a neat piece of art, still very creative and one of a kind, but can be used for lots of other things a little bit easier. And yeah, fun stuff.
And it's nice kind of in my repertoire. I haven't done any drizzle for a little while, but I am going to do it. But I got to get geared up for it when I do it, because actually this table we're on, I got to spread out a whole drop cloth because I paint the canvases flat, and it's just basically house paint with a toothbrush.
You paint them flat white?
No,
What do you
no.
mean? You paint it flat?
Flat,
Oh,
yeah,
I
yeah.
thought you meant, okay.
Yeah, because
Because I was like, so you paint the whole canvas first?
No. I just leave them primed, and I just do my black paint. And I have done some color drizzles as well. People like the drizzle. It's a cool option for somebody that wants an original and they want something unique, but it takes me considerably less time to do a drizzle work. So it's also neat in that, somebody can have an original for, $200 to $600. And it's fun and they're quirky and I like it. Like when I get burnt out from oil painting and the time that takes me, it's nice. I'll do a couple drizzle paintings and they're a little faster and freer, but yeah, I got to get the drop cloth out, and it's different than painting on the easel. Cause it would just, run down, but it's been fun doing all these different projects between, different, products and logo design and artwork and, other business stuff. And it's fun.
Yeah, it's been great. And this is, I feel like a lot of it's, accumulated up to this point for you. Because you've done a lot of stuff in your time and you still do a lot of stuff, but this yurt business where we are here now, and now you're going to guide and all your artwork, and it all ties in really neat. So you talked about earlier about seeing my progression into where I am now, but I've done the same with you, and it's really awesome. All the stuff that you've put together to kind of, I think, one, keep yourself happy and sane and try to enjoy what you do, but also create some really cool experiences for other people. And it's all accumulated really neat. This has been officially the Where Waters Meet screen printing podcast, I think.
It is. I'm going to have the hardest time coming up with a title that's like going to encompass everything that,
because we still got some more time. We do need to talk a little bit about at least something fishing other than painting and printing it.
Yeah, but I do want to say something that's other than screen printing, and it's people probably don't know this, but it's like Bentley also is my full-time summer resident on the river.
Sure. Yeah.
So like we're always fishing, we're always having fun. It's not all about fishing in the summer though. A lot of it's about just hanging out with our families and kind of chilling and relaxing.
Camping, being in the outdoors.
Yeah.
Enjoying Maine for all it has to offer. We're both Mainers. We love Maine. We love the outdoors. Fishing is a huge part of that. But I'm been fortunate enough to get my business to the point where finally we've at least been able to take weekends, which if you own a business, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The last couple summers, 2-3 summers, we've got a little camper. Alex has either had a camper or a bus or something. And we spend a lot of time down on the river hanging out.
We do.
Primary goal is usually catching fish.
Yeah.
But, in the heat of the summer, and I know something that you've wanted this podcast to be a little bit driven towards is conservation, so just as a, snippet on that, we don't usually fish for trout in the heat of the summer because we're trying to keep survival rates up and stuff like that. And
but we get up on like some tribs and we do some different stuff or smallie fish.
Yeah, if it's real hot and we're worried about the temps on the water temps for the fish, there's almost always this cool thing about Maine, especially in the area that we hang out. There's almost always a cold little stream happening, no matter what time of year it is, and if you're willing to work for it, you can usually find something cool. And even if you don't catch fish, which happens plenty, is plenty of days we don't catch anything. But the experience is totally worth it. because Maine's a beautiful place and we love it. So if you enjoy getting outside, then, fly fishing is, if you've ever thought about doing it, I think definitely something worth a try.
And sometimes it's just Bentley and I, and we're getting out in the drift boat for an hour in the morning before everybody wakes up, and then we go do stuff. But it's cool. I enjoy you guys coming up, and I mean, we've been able to see Brooklyn grow up, and Jen, for those who don't know, Jen is a huge part of Bentley's business. And like, I know
Jen's my wife, Brooklyn's my daughter.
Yeah. And like, I've seen how hard you guys have worked to make what it is. And so like, for me, it's so cool to just see people that I care about be able to chill out and relax. And,
appreciate that. And same goes to you and Gretchen and the kids. And it's been a great time. And we are very appreciative. We have some people to hang out with that enjoy the same things that we do in the summertime and just being outside. And, we bring our campers, but I mean, we basically only sleep in them, We are sitting out by the fire or by the river or swimming in the river or fishing or whatever it is. And always something to look forward to. And we spend a lot of time up there. Thanks to Alex having a neat little property up on the Androscoggin that we can just drop our little campers at and hang out.
It's a blast. I love it. It's a good place for us to unplug. Everybody needs one of those places. And, maybe someday we'll have a little, camp lodge or something up there for everybody, which I'm looking forward to. I'm kind of getting sick of this camper thing, but
as you get older, simplify, make it easier. Campers can be a lot, but I think with your guide business, coming up, something like that might be useful to you too. Maybe as another place for people to go and as a little home base if you needed to when you were out on the river and as a backup plan. I'm excited for you on the guiding stuff. I think that's going to be.
I think this summer we might do some shore lunches there at times. As you know, there's like certain floats that I like to pair together that like at certain times, that's a good stopping point, like midday.
Yeah, definitely. It can be a long day on the river. So having good places to stop is, if you're doing a full float, an all day float, can be a lot. But
I agree with that. But yeah, that's a good, I don't know. I think that's a pretty good summation, I guess, of like what we do, how we met, what you do.
Yeah. I'm sure plenty of it was confusing, but for the most part, I think that's.
I know. We should probably have we'll have to play cleanup crew next time. We'll listen to this again and then we'll be like, oh, wow, we got to explain things a little bit better in relation to that. Probably.
Sure. But I think people get the gist. So we can maybe move on to something about.
Yeah, we got, so this is great. I'm excited about this. We have this has been, trying to think of how I'm going to explain this. This has been a culmination of Bentley listening to our previous podcast that we've done, and me having some feedback from other people that have listened.
Yeah, other listeners, viewers.
Yep, and they're like, love it. It's great. Some of them are fly fishermen. Some of them are not. Some of them just like what we're doing here and they know us. And so they're kind of curious about what's happening.
Yeah.
And some of them have said, yeah, but man, you're kind of talking in a different language.
Yeah. Especially when it comes to some of the fly fishing
stuff. When it comes to the fly fishing
like, we're not going to talk about screen printing every time. So that was just because of, trying to introduce me and talk about our relationship and some of the stuff. I'm sure it'll come up, but for the most part, I think on the fly fishing stuff, which is what obviously your podcast is really geared towards a lot of.
It is, but it's also geared towards art. So I am glad that we dove way down the screen printing thing, because it's an art. It's an art.
And I think there's a lot more to go on there. And I think maybe we'll get some feedback from some people and maybe there'll be questions. We can talk more specifically about some other things if people are interested, if we find that out.
Well, and I think like, the idea that you brought up earlier of like, when we do end up having like kind of a project kind of on the docket, I think it would be really cool for us to talk about that and kind of feature it and what went into it.
I would love to see, as you have been painting pretty heavily again, creating new designs, new artwork, and when you're ready to create a new shirt or a new hat design or something along those lines, I think it would be awesome to try to involve it in here and kind of show people the process that we're going through.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, we probably can't set it up really to be in the room when we're sitting on the computer designing it, but we might be able to take some screenshots and show some stuff and you know, I think it'd be a neat way for people to see how it can go from canvas to a product.
Yeah.
That could be pretty fun.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that we'll have a lot of opportunities to do that in the future, which will be good. But the novice aspect where we've had some listeners and watchers on YouTube saying, you know, some of the stuff might be a little bit deep, like last week, John and I did go over like what you need if you're new, which I think was a good new segment for us to kind of touch on, just because, when John and I get back to our roots, we remember how overwhelming it was when we first started out. So Bentley had this idea where Bentley was saying, he's at maybe a little bit of a different knowledge or skill set level in fly fishing. He's fly fished for a long time, but he's not fished as much during that period of time. And so he came up with this title, and I liked it. So this is officially Bentley's brain child. It's called "Tell Me More."
Tell me more.
Tell me more.
Yeah, and the idea really stemmed from, like you said, listening to you guys talk, and which for me now, I gather pretty much all of it. I spent a lot of time with you and John in the boat, but not nearly as much time as you guys have spent together in the boat, and how much, especially John being a guide and guiding in Alaska.
Yeah.
He's a pretty humble guy, but from my perspective, John's a great fly fisherman and has a lot of skill, tons of knowledge that I feel like I'll never catch up to, especially between the two of you. But I've also been very fortunate to learn so much from you guys. But in listening to the podcast, some of that stuff is all still so fresh and new for me.
Right.
Because I've really started fishing hard and, like, I don't know, a little bit after we met, I would say, which it actually has been way longer. I was thinking about it today than I feel like it's been, but like you said, I've done it on a little bit slower level. Haven't had a ton of time to dedicate to it.
Right.
And so my process has been a little slower getting to the point where I am now. So in listening to you guys talk, I think to myself of what any of that would have meant to me, even some of it just a few years ago. And I'd be like, I feel like I just learned that terminology that I'm hearing you say sometimes. And so I'm putting myself in the shoes of somebody either that doesn't fly fish at all, or more importantly, I think that's listening to this podcast to maybe learn some stuff, because you guys are doing these segments like, on the Vice and the gear reviews that can be really educational to people who are trying to get into fly fishing. But you guys are almost too comfortable with it at times where you kind of may assume that people know what you're talking about all the time. And you guys are great at explaining most of it, but I'm sure there are some things that you kind of skim over and terminology that you use that maybe.
I've listened back to myself after hearing some of that feedback, and I definitely think that's the case. And another thing that I noticed is I give hand gestures. So I will be showing what I'm discussing with my hands.
Yeah. And people think maybe he's casting a spell with his fly rod.
I don't know. Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, my hands are moving. It's the Italian in me probably. But like what ends up happening is having the camera here.
Yeah.
I don't realize that it's affecting how I'm going about describing something, but it is. And I don't know it until I go back, or I don't know it until I actually just listen to the audio.
You assume everybody's watching as well.
Right. And I forget, there's actually a lot of people that this is their daily, not that they tune in every day, but I mean, like, listening to podcast audio is their daily drive to work thing.
Yeah. I listen to a lot of podcasts while driving. I think a lot of people do, or maybe while they're working. I like when I'm actually at the press and printing, I like listening to podcasts.
Yeah. That's my time. Like when I'm up here doing like mindless things alone.
Yeah. They're great. It's a great time to learn about stuff.
It's
and
awesome.
Keeps your mind occupied for someone that has a busy mind.
It keeps it active. But yeah, and I think too, though, like we were talking, about Tell Me More and on in that segment that we're thinking about doing here. And I think it's important to note, because you were talking about John and you were saying kind of like where you're at and stuff like that, but learning style has a lot to do with it. We did touch a little bit on that in last week's episode.
Okay.
And and I think that everybody's different on how they learn about it. And like you were saying, like you love the hands-on, like having a mentor or just a peer and like talking and like, well, why are you doing this and this
Yeah.
and this and this and this?
Yeah.
I'm like a consumer of information. So like instead
Right.
of like watching TV at night, I'll just go off on some crazy tangent of like, studying, stonefly life cycles or
Right.
something
Yeah.
bananas like,
Right.
that, people probably don't want to really listen to, but I get kind of in depth with it. So, but yeah, I think that would be a good segment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to try this on this, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, new segment. Tell me more.
Tell me more.
And the idea of the name comes from just like when you're hearing Alex and John and some of the other people, like I listened to the Mike Jones podcast, like super knowledgeable guy, like
Wicked.
obviously incredibly, knowledgeable about everything fly fishing, and you could tell he has a wealth of knowledge and really knows what he's talking about. And but again, for some people it might have been a little bit over their head. So I thought I would hear certain things, and that's kind of the thought that would come into my mind, like, oh, tell me more about that.
Yeah.
So want to try this? We're gonna do tell me more. The idea that I had was from a previous podcast you and John did, from your On the Vice segment. I think you were talking about the Hornberg, which I'm a little upset about because I was hoping if I had a chance to be on this podcast and I had a chance to do On the Vice, I would get to talk about the Hornberg, because it's, you know this enough about me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I have a rod that always has a Hornberg on it at all times, because it's so versatile. And yeah. So anyway, I was a little jealous and bummed I didn't get to be a part of the Hornberg talk. But during that podcast, I think it was during that podcast anyway, you guys mentioned something about the different ways to, you can fish it like this, you can fish it like that, you can fish it like that. And one of the things was you kind of skimmed over was you can fish it on the swing.
Yeah.
On the swing. And I feel like you guys, especially, I don't know if a lot of other guys describe it this way, but on the swing, I feel like I say it this way because I've learned from you guys. So that's where I think we should start. Tell me more. It's one really simple thing.
On the swing. Like what I meant by
on
that?
the swing mean when you're fishing, when you're fly fishing specifically?
Yeah.
And, how do you go about it? Let's seems like a simple thing, but what are you really doing?
That's a good question. And this is like, we could have a whole segment on presentation, but
is it you tie up a swing on the tree and you fish from shore off the swing?
Yeah.
Or?
I put an old swing in the middle of the drift boat.
Yeah.
And then no, it's not that. What I will say is you have basic presentations of a fly, and to not get too complicated with it, you have dead drift presentations, which means that you want that fly to travel at the same pace as the current of the river.
Yep.
And nymphing would be that way. So if you were to flip an indicator with a nymph setup, and that was then floating, you'd want that to float dead drift at the same speed as the current, and it would present itself as a natural fly down near the bottom for a trout. That would be a dead drift. If you were fishing a dry fly, you would not be at the bottom of the water column. You would be on the top of the water column, and you would have floating on that fly. And
at the top, you mean specifically on the surface, not underneath the water.
Yes, exactly. So you'd be right on top, and you'd want that fly to dead drift on the top. So those are two basic dead drift presentations. Then if you were to be stripping a streamer,
stripping.
That's another kind of presentation where you're stripping line with one hand, so you're animating that streamer back.
It'd almost be like reeling in if you were traditional fishing.
You're kind of like giving it an action, almost like a lure. You'd be reeling in. But on the swing specifically is when you cast your line, and it could be cast at a 30-degree angle, it could be at a 45-degree angle, it could be upstream. But what you're essentially doing is allowing that fly to swing in the current. So it's making a motion. So let's say that let's say that I'm facing the opposite banking and the river is flowing this way.
Yep.
And I was to cast across that current will take my fly line that's stretched out straight, and it's going to start swinging the fly in front of me.
Right, because you're attached to it. So it's like
Right.
a protractor almost, where you're the fixed point.
Yes.
And the line is attached to you, but the current is bringing it around at almost an arch.
Exactly.
Yep.
And typically there's different things you can do, but typically a swing is a fairly passive way of fishing. I would explain it as, in that you have to be patient and you're allowing the river to kind of swing that. There's a lot of nuances to on the swing, where you might swing with a floating line so that it's primarily on the top. You could swing with an intermediate line where it's submerged somewhat. You could swing with a sinking line that's deeper. You can animate and twitch a fly on the swing, but when you hear people talk about a swung fly, it's typically a little bit more of a passive presentation, but it's a great presentation for certain fall run fish like our landlocked salmon. And it's also a great presentation to imitate emerging insects that are coming from the bottom of the river to the top of the river. And it's a very classic presentation that is age old, where they would swing wet flies, and wet flies were designed to be swung.
Right.
And it's a little bit of a lost art, the wet fly aspect of it, but there are still people that swing some of the old classic wet fly patterns and soft hackles and spider flies, like they call them in Europe and what have you. But it's in relation to the Hornberg that you were discussing that kind of brought this up.
Yeah.
That is, I fish that in a small size that imitates a caddis, and I typically will cast it across, and I will actually mend upstream. So this is another nuance to a presentation.
Yep.
I'll mend upstream, and then what that does is that allows that fly to have a period of time to sink before the current creates a belly in my line.
Yep.
And once that belly comes tight, then that fly will swing across the current and come up in the water column. So you're imitating.
Like it's coming up from the bottom.
Like it's coming up from the bottom.
Which
will
trigger a chase or a strike.
Yeah. And you can target fish that are actively feeding.
Yep.
By doing that in front of them. And if you get so that you have a feel as to the speed to swing it, in the depth to let it sink, and if you get a feel for where your fly is in relation to that leader, you can actually get pretty good at bringing that fly directly up in front of a fish's face, and then they go, oh, and then they come up and they take that.
As I learned I feel like we do a lot of it out of the boat.
Yes. And
that's where I really learned how effective it can be. I feel like, as somebody, again, new to a lot of this stuff. So when you're wading in a river, and especially if you're up kind of deep, it's a little harder.
Yeah.
But out of the boat is where I learned how valuable it can be. So then it really helped me in my wade fishing, swinging stuff, and not just doing the emerger type of rise, but even just for me, like swinging, a streamer. So I feel like I didn't fish pretty much any streamers realistically until I was able to fish out of a boat. And then I realized how streamers work and how to fish them.
Yeah.
Because it's, again, almost everything's a little bit easier out of the boat. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So because you're up above the water, so you have a lot more control.
Yeah, and you learn, like you were saying, giving you that confidence. I think the important thing out of a boat is you see so many fish reacting to your fly that don't even take it, because you are so much higher above the water.
You can see
and
a
so
lot
what
more.
happens is you learn a lot about fish behavior in relation to what your fly is doing.
Right. So when you go back and wade fish, even though maybe you can't see them, you have an idea, like if you get any bumps or bites, you can go, okay, I've experienced this before. I can't necessarily witness it, but I know what's going on now.
Yeah.
And you can adjust to try to, make it happen that way. So that was really important. And on the swing, I think it's an important piece of bridging the gap for me. And maybe you didn't look at it this way, but for me, I think it's important for people to hear. It bridged the gap for me for learning how to fish streamers a little bit.
Yeah.
And because they're bigger and heavier, you don't want to be casting for me from, somebody who does, fishes a little less. I get fatigued a little easier. And once you realize you're having success on streamers, you don't want to be casting it a whole lot more than you need to. And so a nice long swing, covers a lot of area and gives you a little bit of an idea of how the fish are reacting, and usually produces pretty good results.
It does. And I think that, fishing from a boat makes it obviously a lot easier because you can target specific fish because you can just move throughout the river to where you need to be. You're a little bit more at the mercy of like the shoreline of where you are and what that gives you access to and what fish are within casting distance to you. But I think swinging a fly is a great presentation to have in your back pocket because there's times when it's extremely effective with streamers and other flies like emergers like we talked about. But there's also other times where it's just not as effective, and like we'll be able to get into other, forms of streamer fishing and fly fishing, and whether you're bombing the banks and, casting to the bank and stripping that back actively to the boat and hitting the bank again and coming and it depends on what you're fishing for too. Species has a huge part in it. Fish size, are you trying to catch a 20-inch brown?
Right.
Or are you trying to fool, a fish that you see rising,
Yep. I think it's important, to kind of mention as well, you've got the swing part of the presentation, but what do you do after the swing? So you've swung, your lines kind of out at max length down the river from you, because that was the whole point. You're casting out to the side. You're letting it swing through the current. It's coming around. You're now facing typically downstream. Yeah,
and we call that dead hang down.
Yep.
Or hang down.
Hang down.
When it's directly below you.
I tend I would consider myself a pretty impatient person when it comes to fly fishing. And I will tend to strip a little too. A lot of times I don't even let it get all the way to full hang. Like I start stripping on the end part of the swing, partly because I've had good results, but also because I'm just wicked excited typically to be out, and I get after it a little too hard in the beginning. And but if you're patient, you let it swing down. Now you have a whole, in my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, you kind of have a whole nother second life of this presentation now, where you're going to strip it back and you're going to do something totally different with your fly. So if you're to the point where you've made it all the way to the end of the swing, obviously that, at least for that cast, didn't work. So now you have this moment where you can strip it back and try to kind of a little bit different presentation to see if that's going to entice a fish on the way home. And
that's a very important part of it. There's days where you'll have fish that they're interested in the swing. And I've spent a lot of time on high banks actually watching fish, mostly landlocked salmon, where I have somebody swinging. And what I'll see, it's really fun to watch actually. So say that you have a salmon, sitting in a lie over here, right? And you swing that fly like right perfectly down in front of his face, and it's coming across. What will happen a lot of times is that fish will say, he'll go, "Ooh, piece of candy," and he'll just kind of come over, and what he'll do is he'll just track and trail that fly. And sometimes they don't take it. They're very lazy about that. And then what will happen is you get to that hang down. And what's funny is sometimes they don't break their curiosity, and they'll just sit there for a second. And then once you do two little bumps, just two little strips or whatever, then they'll come up and take that. So you never know, especially with like fall landlocked salmon, you never know what is going to entice them in that swing. Then you have days where they don't want that fly to even twitch. They want the smoothest swing that you could ever possibly have, and they'll take it mid swing. It happens with trout too. You never know what they're going to want. Sometimes they love what you were saying. You were saying that you get impatient. Sometimes they love it if you have a nice long
Yeah.
swing, and then you start actually stripping that slightly at the tail end of that swing. But it's very, very common with all trout, salmonid species where you can swing a fly, you get to dead hang down, and then you get a couple bumps on that fly coming straight back to the boat. And that fish actually trailed that fly and was like, kind of is on the fence, is like, I don't really know. But then it starts moving away from them. And then that predatory response comes out, and then they kind of snap it. So yeah, it's not that cast is not wasted when the swing is completed.
Right.
Like you said, it's the beginning of a second presentation.
And I thought that's why that would be a neat one to talk about, because there can be a lot to swinging a fly as opposed to just, dead drifting a fly or dry fly fishing on top of the surface, where you kind of have a little bit more of a limited window because of how, like you were saying, how important it is to match the float, the speed of the river and all that stuff. So you really, that's a little bit more technical, a little bit more important to match the speed of the water and all that type of stuff. Whereas when you're fishing a little more typically under the surface, swinging a fly, there's a little bit more variability. So even though it sounds like there's a lot to it, I think it's a great thing to learn for people getting into fly fishing, because there's also a lot of different flies that you can use to fish that way.
You can, and hands down, it is probably one of the easiest presentations for you to learn as a newbie, because, as long as you can get your your line somewhere in the water out beside you, you're going to be able to formulate some sort of swing.
Use the current to do the work.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the most important suggestion that I would have from like just experience and personal level with like any form of presentation with streamers, whether it be stripping or whether it be swinging. A lot of people think that swinging is 100% a passive, like you just cast out and just let it do its thing.
Right.
But there's a million nuances. So whether you mend upstream, whether you mend downstream, whether you just leave it where it lies, that's going to either slow down the swing, speed up the swing.
Right.
And so constantly play around with speed of the swing, depth of where your fly is when you start the swing, play around with if you're going to animate the fly on the swing, whether you're going to start stripping at the tail end of it. There's times where it's extremely effective, believe it or not, to just let it soak at the tail end of the swing. A lot of...
Especially out of the boat, we've caught stuff unexpectedly.
Oh,
you're stopping at the end of the swing to take a bite of your snack or take a drink, and boom, you get a hit. Because sometimes they just like the dangle.
And that's a big salmon, like a true Atlantic, like sea run Atlantic salmon tactic. That's a big thing with that. And then once you get to that second part of the presentation where the swing is complete, play around a ton with your strips, just like you would if you were doing any form of streamer fishing. Have short strips, fast strips, have long pauses. You have fish a lot of times where they like to chase the strip coming back, but they're a little bit lenient on it or a little bit, hesitant on it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And what will end up happening is they'll take it on a pause.
Yeah.
So, you're like pop, 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 pop. And then all of a sudden you like give it a long pause. And then all of a sudden you feel a pickup after it sat there for like a second or two.
Right.
Sometimes they don't want that. The only thing that I can guarantee you is that fish they're never going to do exactly the same thing every single time.
I'm always intrigued by the fish that I catch while stripping.
Yeah.
Because every time you go out, if you go out and you have a good day and you're catching a lot of stuff, fishing streamers or under the surface, subsurface type of flies by stripping and swinging, like by the end of the day, if you had a great day and you kind of figured it out for that day, you basically think you made it. You're pro.
You're like,
I can't believe I figured that out. That strip was working mint.
I got it dialed.
Yeah, and then you go back out and you may never catch another fish stripping it that way for the whole season.
Yeah.
And it's pretty unbelievable. I'm a big fan, as a musician, I'm a big fan of the offbeat bump on the way back where you just do it very random.
Yeah.
And I've actually had pretty good luck with that, because then it's like you're almost trying a few different things on the way in, but you don't make it super consistent. But I've also had great luck with being like, okay, if you don't do it exactly like this on time, exactly the same way every time, they're not interested at all. So you're definitely right about how it's never the same. It's always different.
It's always different.
But that's the fun part.
It is the fun part. And I think that the probably the best fly anglers that I know that, you know, I really am just intrigued by how they do it and how successful they are all the time. They're always changing up their presentation and always doing things new and being unconventional at times. You know what I mean? Like you got to be playful with what you're doing out there and just mix it up. And, you know, just don't be a one show pony. You know what I mean? Where you're like, you know, this is what I do and it didn't work. And, you know, I mean, not unless that's your thing. I mean, I get it. Like, I think everybody, I call it playing by the cards that you decided to play by. You know what I mean? Like if you love dry fly fishing and you want to see a dry fly eat today, that's awesome. You know what I mean? You might only catch one fish. It might not be a good day for that, you know?
Yeah.
If you wanted to catch more fish, mix it up. But like, but if those are the cards that you want to play by, awesome. And I have days where I do that.
Yeah.
You know, there's sometimes it's fun where it's kind of a challenge. And I'm like, no, I'm going to catch a fish on a hopper today.
Yep. We've done it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun.
It's fun.
It is. It's
Absolutely.
fun. Man, we're getting deep here on time, Bentley.
Are we?
Yeah.
Are we setting a record yet?
I think we have. We've set a record. Yeah. We're at an hour and 20 minutes.
Okay. So there's definitely nobody listening or watching at this point.
No, no. I don't think anybody's saying, tell me more. I think they're saying, tell me less.
Please stop telling me more.
The next episode, we're going to be like, okay, we're scrapping that. It's going to be called Tell Me Less.
Yeah. That. Yep. We'll have to have a take on it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I think it's great.
Yeah. No, appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'll get to come back and
oh yeah. No, you guys will be seeing more Bentley and his beard.
Yeah, the beard's not going anywhere.
No.
Maybe we can tell the story of the beard next time.
We should.
Yeah.
We should.
It's always got to be a story about any beard.
I feel like we got to have John here too, though, with his beard, so that you guys can humiliate me with my small beard that I have now. So,
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah.
But anyways, so thanks for coming on, and you guys make sure to like and subscribe, and thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys later.